Every central bank in the world keeps a pile of somebody else's money. China's is worth about $3.41 trillion. Japan's around $1.38 trillion. Switzerland holds reserves worth close to its entire annual economic output. And the United States, whose currency all of them are hoarding, holds almost nothing. In this video, we go through the biggest holders one at a time, and for each you get the same scoreboard. How much they hold in dollars, what share of their economy that represents, and the question that matters most, where the money actually came from. Because two countries can hold identical reserves for completely opposite reasons. One earned them by selling goods to the world. The other created its own currency and bought them. We will also cover why countries hold money they never intend to spend, what that insurance costs them every year, and the day in 2022 that made every central bank on Earth rethink what a reserve actually is. Let's start at the top. Every central bank keeps a pile of foreign money, and the sizes are staggering. Number 1, China, with about $3.41 trillion of foreign exchange reserves. That is not a narrow lead. It is nearly 3 times the country in second place, Japan, which holds around $1.38 trillion in official reserve assets. Third is Switzerland, with something in the region of 700 billion Swiss francs. Then India, at a record $697 billion, and Taiwan. But here is what makes this series worth watching. This is not a wealth ranking. Two countries can hold identical reserves for completely opposite reasons. One because it earned them selling goods, the other because it printed its own money to buy them. Where the reserves came from matters more than how big the pile is. How does one country accumulate $3.4 trillion of somebody else's money? China earned most of it. For decades, China sold far more to the world than it bought, running enormous trade surpluses, and every one of those surpluses arrived as foreign currency, overwhelmingly dollars. Exporters handed those dollars to the banking system, and the central bank accumulated them rather than letting them all be converted into yuan, which would have pushed the currency sharply higher and made Chinese exports more expensive. So the reserves are partly earned and partly a deliberate policy choice. Relative to the size of its economy, though, around 18% of output, China is nowhere near the top. It looks enormous because China is enormous. Hold that thought, because it changes the whole ranking. Japan holds around $1.38 trillion, and the source is different from China's. Japan's reserves come substantially from currency intervention. When the yen moves in a direction the government dislikes, Japan's Ministry of Finance steps into the market. For decades, that meant selling yen and buying dollars to stop the yen strengthening and hurting exporters, and those purchased dollars became the reserve pile. Recently, the direction reversed. In July of 2026, Japan spent something in the order of $53 billion going the other way, selling reserves to buy yen and stop it weakening further. That is the key insight about reserves. They are not a trophy, they are ammunition. You accumulate them in the years you want your currency weaker, and you spend them in the years you want it stronger. Now the most extreme case on Earth. Switzerland's foreign exchange reserves are worth roughly as much as everything Switzerland produces in a year. Close to 100% of its entire economy, held in foreign currency. No other developed country comes close. And Switzerland did not earn that money selling watches. It created it. Because the franc is a safe haven. Every time the world panics, money floods into Switzerland and drives the franc up, which would crush Swiss exporters and push an economy with inflation already near 0.5% into outright deflation. So the Swiss National Bank creates francs and uses them to buy foreign assets, holding the currency down. The result is a central bank that has become one of the world's largest investors, owning enormous quantities of foreign shares and bonds, simply as a side effect of defending its own exporters. India's foreign exchange reserves recently hit a record, close to $697 billion, which puts it among the top handful of holders on Earth. But India does not run large trade surpluses like China. It usually runs a deficit. So where do the reserves come from? Mostly from capital flowing in, foreign investment into Indian companies and markets, plus money sent home by Indians working abroad, with the Reserve Bank of India buying those dollars as they arrive rather than letting the rupee climb. And the motivation is memory. In 1991, India nearly ran out of foreign currency entirely, had to airlift gold to London as collateral, and was forced into an emergency bailout. Every reserve India has built since is insurance against that ever happening again. Reserves are usually a scar, not a trophy. Now change the measure and the whole ranking collapses. Instead of the raw dollar pile, compare reserves with the size of the economy holding them. Suddenly China, at around 18% of its output, drops far down the table. At the top you find Hong Kong, whose reserves exceed 100% of its economy, Switzerland at close to 100%, Taiwan at roughly 70%, and Singapore in the same territory. What do those four have in common? They are all small, extremely open economies that are heavily exposed to global capital flows, and three of them either peg or heavily manage their currency. If you promise to hold an exchange rate, you must be able to defend that promise, and the only way to defend it is with reserves. Big countries hold reserves. Small open ones need them. Here is the strangest fact in this whole series. The country whose currency every other central bank stockpiles holds almost no foreign exchange reserves itself, on the order of 1% of its economy. Why would the United States bother? Reserves exist so a country can pay for imports and settle debts in a currency it cannot create. America can create the currency. Its imports are priced in dollars, its debts are issued in dollars, and it prints dollars. When America needs foreign currency, it simply buys it, because everyone accepts what it pays with. Economists call this the exorbitant privilege, and this is its purest expression. Every other country on earth must save somebody else's money as insurance. The issuer of the reserve currency is the only one exempt, which is precisely why control of that currency is such a strategic prize. So where do reserves actually come from? There are essentially two routes, and telling them apart tells you almost everything about a country. The first is earning them. You sell more to the world than you buy, you run a current account surplus, and foreign currency accumulates naturally. That is China, Taiwan, South Korea, and the Gulf states. Those reserves represent genuine national saving. The second is buying them. Your central bank creates its own currency and uses it to purchase foreign assets, usually to stop its exchange rate rising. That is Switzerland, Japan for many years, and India. Those reserves are matched by newly created money at home. And there is a third, weakest route, borrowing them, which some emerging markets rely on, and it is the most fragile of all, because borrowed reserves can be recalled exactly when you need them most. Why hold hundreds of billions of dollars idle instead of spending it on hospitals and roads? 3 reasons, all of them insurance. First, import cover. The traditional rule of thumb is that a country should hold at least 3 months of imports in reserves, so it can keep buying food, fuel, and medicine even if its export earnings stop. Second, defending the exchange rate, because if you peg or manage your currency, the only way to hold the line when markets push against you is to sell reserves and buy your own money. Third, and most important for emerging markets, protection against a sudden stop, the moment when foreign investors all pull their money out at once. Countries that lived through 1997 in Asia or 1998 in Russia never forgot. Reserves are the fire extinguisher you hope never to use. Reserves are insurance, and insurance has a premium. Here's what it costs. Reserves must be held in safe, liquid assets, overwhelmingly government bonds of rich countries, which pay very low returns. Meanwhile, the country holding them typically borrows at much higher rates, because it is seen as riskier. So a developing country can find itself lending to the United States at 2% while borrowing at 7%. That gap, multiplied across hundreds of billions, is a real and continuing cost, and economists estimate it can run to a meaningful share of national income every year for the biggest holders. And there is an opportunity cost on top, because that capital could have built infrastructure or schools instead. This is the genuine debate about reserves. How much insurance is too much, when the premium is money your people could have used today? In 2022, something happened that rewrote the rules of central banking. Following the invasion of Ukraine, Western governments immobilized roughly $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves held in their financial systems. Not seized in the usual sense, but frozen and unusable. And every central bank on Earth understood the implication immediately. Reserves held as dollars, euros, pounds, or yen are ultimately entries in somebody else's banking system, and that somebody can switch them off. Look at what Russia holds today. Total international reserves of around $759 billion, but only about $421 billion of that is foreign currency. $337 billion is gold, sitting physically inside Russia, where no foreign government can reach it. So where is all this heading? Toward gold. Central banks have been buying gold at around 1,000 tons a year on average for 4 years, a pace not seen in modern history, with roughly 1,090 tons in 2024 and 863 in 2025. Meanwhile, the dollar's share of allocated foreign exchange reserves has fallen to about 57%, down from roughly 71% around the turn of the millennium. And surveys of reserve managers point the same way, with about 45% planning to add gold within the year and around 74% expecting lower dollar holdings over 5 years. Be careful, though. This is a slow drift, not a collapse. Nothing else is liquid enough to replace the dollar. So tell me, do you think the dollar keeps its crown to 2040? Comment below and share this with someone who follows markets. Let's put the board together. By size, China leads at about $3.41 trillion, then Japan at $1.38 trillion, then Switzerland, India at a record $697 billion, and Taiwan. By share of the economy, the order inverts completely, with Hong Kong above 100%, Switzerland close to it, Taiwan and Singapore around 70%, and China down at roughly 18%. On source, China, Taiwan, Korea, and the Gulf earned theirs through current account surpluses, while Switzerland, Japan, and India largely bought theirs through intervention, creating domestic currency to purchase foreign assets. On purpose, reserves by import cover the ability to defend an exchange rate and protection against foreign money leaving all at once. On cost, they sit in low-yielding foreign bonds while the holder often borrows at far higher rates, which is a real and permanent premium. And on Russia, of $759 billion in total reserves, $337 billion is now gold. So the real lesson about reserves is that they are not a scoreboard of national wealth. They are a measure of fear and of what a country is afraid of. India builds them because it nearly ran out of foreign currency in 1991 and has never forgotten. Asian economies build them because of 1997. Switzerland builds them because being a safe haven is a curse for its exporters. The Gulf builds them because oil revenue is finite. And Russia now holds a third of its reserves in gold because in 2022 the world discovered that a reserve held abroad can simply be switched off.